Well, thank you everyone for watching this. My name is Michael Moyner, and I'm delighted to just be able to share a little bit about what Soulspace is. Soulspace is a spiritual extra, an optional spiritual extra that you can add to any outreach activity. Maybe it's a coffee morning or a luncheon club, perhaps it's a bereavement group, or maybe an after school club or a youth club. Whatever outreach activity you have, it may be that Soul Space can be an optional spiritual extra that you add to it. And the aim of Soul Space is to be a bridge between people who don't come to church, perhaps they've got no Christian background at all, a bridge into the Christian faith if they want to cross that bridge. So the idea for Soul Space, it came from a church, a rural church in Lincolnshire. They had a luncheon club, about 25 people or so who came to that lunch week by week. They didn't normally come to church, but they did come to the luncheon club. And one day, the leaders of the group, they said, what we're going to do is after lunch, we're going to invite you to stay behind if you want. Don't feel that you've got to. You may be busy. This is entirely optional. We'll be here next week, whatever you do. But if you'd like to stay behind, we'll gather around a table. We'll light a candle. We'll play a little bit of Christian music. We'll read a passage from Scripture. We'll have a little time of silence while we think about the passage. And then we'll have an opportunity where we can hold in our thoughts a person or a situation in need, or offer them to God in prayer, however we understand God. And then there'll be a short little poem at the end. 10 minutes in all, just 10 minutes to gather, have a time of reflection, a time of quietness in our busy lives, if that's what we'd like. And so about 15 people stayed behind, and they really enjoyed it. And they came back the next time and repeated it. And you can imagine how this might have developed. You might have, the group might have met for 10 minutes or so, week after week. And then after a bit, perhaps someone would say, can we talk about these Bible passages? I've got thoughts about them. I'm not sure I always agree with them, don't really understand them. And so you might put in a little discussion time. And what you would then have is you'd have a welcome, you'd have the beginnings of worship in music, you'd have a Bible reading, you'd have the sermon in the form of a discussion, you'd have the beginnings of prayer, and you'd have something akin to a blessing. So you'd have, if you like, the beginnings of Christian worship. And then maybe later on you'd add in a confession or a Lord's Prayer, and perhaps even a creed at some stage. And then you'd have fuller Christian worship. And maybe eventually, from time to time, you'd add in a Eucharistic prayer and you'd celebrate Holy Communion together. And so there would be, as it were, four stepping stones: a taste of spirituality, the beginnings of Christian worship, fuller Christian worship, and full sacramental worship. And that's really what we've done with Soulspace, is we've created templates, running orders, material that you can use in order to put into place these four stepping stones designed for people who don't come to church and with very little or no Christian background. You'd start perhaps with a taste of spirituality. You then have beginnings of Christian worship, fuller Christian worship, and full Christian worship. And the basic structure of Soul Space is you have a time of stillness, you have a time of spiritual reflection, and then you have a time of seeking the good of the world. So there's an inward movement, an upward movement, and an outward movement. And you can use those three movements, inward, upward, outward, with five different themes: connecting, peace, joy, comfort, and guidance. So if you go to the running orders on the website, you might go to Taste of Spirituality. You'd find the outline, and you'd find it starts, first of all, with welcome, and you'd be given three choices of phrases and words, sentences that you might use. And you would choose one of those options. You might well adapt it, or there's a fourth option, you could make up your own. Again, as I say, these sentences, phrases, all written for people who don't come to church and have very little or perhaps no Christian background. So, no Christian jargon, no assumptions of Christian faith, all very comfortable for people who are not used to church. So, you'd have start with a welcome, and then there'd be a time of stillness, and there'd be various options. You could light a candle, you could use some pebbles, you could use a jar of water. Three options that you could choose, and each running order has different options. So you could choose one of those options. And again, for each option, there are three possible things you might say. You choose one of those options, you adapt it, or there's a fourth option, you make up your own. And then after the stillness, there'd be a time of spiritual reflection. And again, if you're using this Taste of Spirituality version, you could have a Bible reading, and there's suggestions as to which Bible passage you could use, or you could use a picture, and there's a photograph, and again, there's suggestions as to where you can find other photographs that are free of charge, and or you could use a poem. One poem is provided, and again, there's suggestions as to where you might find other poems. And a colleague of mine, Mark Berry's written some great questions to ask yourself while you are looking at, say, at the picture or at the poem, some brilliant questions that people can just ask themselves as they spend time in reflection on the picture or whatever. So again, you could introduce that spiritual reflection. There'd be three possible things you'd say. You select one, adapt it, or you choose a fourth option, you make up your own. And then there's a turning outward towards the world, and you're invited, people are invited to hold in their thoughts a person or a situation in need, or to pray about that personal situation to God as they understand God. And then finally, there's a short little conclusion, a poem that can serve as a blessing. And so you might well start with a taste of spirituality. It can be very quiet if you want it to be quiet, but some groups they don't want too much quietness, and so you can have there's time for you to ask people how they're reacting to what they're experiencing, what their thoughts they're having, and if they want to share them. And so it could be quite a chatty occasion if groups want that. So the whole thing is designed to be very, very flexible. You might start with a taste of spirituality, and then you might add in a little discussion time on the Bible passage. What we find actually is several people have said that when they've done Soulspace, people stay behind and talk. One minister said to me, Mike, they stayed for a whole hour afterwards and talked. That's never happened to me before. And there have been one or two other groups. So one group, I think they had to reorganize their whole morning because the people were talking so much. And so it may well be that you find it very easy to introduce a discussion of the Bible passage. You have the Bible passage, the reading, and then you have a discussion. And what you'd find on the site are four, in that running order, the beginnings of Christian worship. You'd find there are four types of questions that you could ask. They're sort of like Lectio Divina type questions, which means you'd encourage people just to select a word or a phrase and think, why have they chosen that? And think and ponder on that. You could have some questions that invite people into a story. I wonder how how Jesus looked, or what did he what was the tone of voice, or how might I have felt, or if you'd addressed those words to me, what would it have felt like? So sort of wonder type questions that you can imagine yourself in the situation. There's some questions based around sort of social justice themes, or there's what I call Bible talk. Four very simple questions. If this story happened today, what would it look like? Or if these words were spoken and lived out today, what would they look like? Next question, what's this story saying to me? Third question, could it make a difference to my life? And if so, how? And then perhaps you go and do an experiment. Let's see if it does make a difference to our lives. And then you come back at the end. And fourth question, did it make a difference to our lives? So, four different types of question, all designed for people who are not comfortable with discussion. So for folks who are not confident or not comfortable, certainly not used to talking about the Bible, four types of questions, none of them have right and wrong answers. So there's nothing to be embarrassed about. All are very much based on experience. They're not, great theoretical questions or anything like that. They're rooted in everyday life as questions that people can engage with. And so, as I say, you might include that in your running order, and you then have, as I say, the beginnings of Christian worship. Welcome, the time of reflection at the beginning, perhaps with some music. I should say, by the way, that there are three playlists of music, and you can choose a piece of music from a classical playlist, a contemporary secular, contemporary worship, and the music is grouped by mood so that it's easy to choose a piece of music. So you could have the beginnings of worship and music, you've got a Bible reading, you've got a sermon in the form of discussion, you've got the beginnings of prayer, and you've got something akin to a blessing at the end. And so you've got the beginnings of Christian worship. And then later on, you may want to add in a confession. And we've written two confessions for people who may be on a journey of spiritual exploration, but certainly wouldn't call themselves Christians. So they're words that people can say and feel comfortable in saying, who are not yet Christian believers. You might want to add into the mix a creed. And again, we call the confession, by the way, a moment of honesty. You might want to add in, alongside the moment of honesty, something akin to a creed, which we just call sharing our journey together. And again, a couple of prayers, as it were, that are written that people who are not yet Christians can easily say. You might want him to add in a Lord's Prayer as well. And if you did that, you'd have sort of fuller Christian worship. And then perhaps at the end, later on, you might add in a Eucharistic prayer, and then you would have a full, in Church of England terms, a sacramental worship for those who want that. So we've had one person, one church, one group has traveled that whole journey in downtown Sacramento in North California. Just over in late 2024, they heard about Soulspace. The minister went back to his downtown church. On Saturday mornings, they distribute free food to people who live on the streets. And he gathered some of them together, 10 to 25 meet regularly to do Soulspace. And after a couple of months, they were meeting and enjoying it. And so the minister said, during the prayer time, would you like me to come round and anoint you with oil and pray for your healing? And they said yes, and he did that, and they loved it. So every time they meet, there's an anointing with oil and a prayer for healing as part of the prayer time. And then a year later, he emailed me. He said, Mike, I've just done my first Holy Communion with these people, and they loved it so much that they've asked me to do Holy Communion, celebrate Holy Communion with them every other week. So there you are. There's a group that have traveled in 12 months, that little journey from a taste of spirituality to full Christian worship. What we're finding is that this is it's very flexible. Some people follow the running orders quite closely and just adapt the words. But many people just use the running orders as a starting point. Instead of having a blank piece of paper, they've got some ideas and then they begin to play around and adapt them. So you can use this as close to the running order as you like, or you can adapt it as much as you like. You can vary the length and you can put in your own content. If you wanted to put in a sort of alpha course instead of the Bible reading and the discussion, you could do that for 8 weeks or so. And then you'd have a sort of Soulspace as a wrapper for alpha. And then after alpha is finished, you can continue with Soulspace. And so you've got to follow up to alpha or any other course that you want to use, any discipleship material that you want to use. And we're finding that this is Soulspace is being used. We have one or two toddler groups that are trying it. We have people right at the extreme other end of the age spectrum using Soulspace. We have all the ages in between. We have people from rural areas, from inner city type areas, from suburbia. So it seems to cross the age groups. We found there's a real appetite for Soulspace in the schools and among youth workers and young people as well.